And so I've asked Steve Parks a couple of weeks ago. They started to attend here some time ago. And as he was attending, we found out that Steve Parks has cancer in both lungs. They found the cancer because of another problem. And God's been dealing with his heart. And I've asked Steve, his wife is sitting right beside him. Her name is Lib. I've asked Steve if he'd come this morning and just tell us what good came out of the cancer diagnosis. Please.
Thank you, Pastor. I prayed to the Lord this morning that he would not let me be too emotional up here. But the Lord's idea of emotional and mine may be two different things, let me tell you. Pastor did a pretty good job of introducing my wife already. That's my wife of 17 years, Elizabeth. I just want to give you a little bit of background. I was saved St. Patrick's Day, 1997, and in a Masonic lodge. We were meeting in the Elks Hall as our church, and we got booted out of the church for the Sunday morning, so we moved into the Masonic lodge. And the pastor preached a message using a big whiteboard. He preached a message that, whose family are you in? The Lord's family or the devil's family? And at the end of the service, I was standing there looking at my hand up in the air. It was up in the air before the pastor asked if anybody wanted to step forward and find out how to be saved. And that's a good story in itself. Now, I've been dealing with doctors and the medical system for probably the last 3 years, and believe me, I would do anything not to have to get a needle. But these last 3 months, I have been poked and prodded, and there's needles the size of a caulking gun that I've had to deal with. I was hurt at work. I slipped a disc in my back, and quite badly. And I was off work, and I tried to go back to work on light duties, and I was not sleeping. I was hurting more than I was sleeping, and after 6 weeks of not sleeping, I was a wreck. I mean, an emotional wreck. And I went back to the doctor for my back, trying to get some relief. And I told him that I had this cough now, a cough that made my back hurt. And the more I coughed, the more it hurt, and the more I didn't sleep. And it just was bad. So he says, well, Steve, maybe you have pneumonia. We'll send you for a chest x-ray just to rule that out, so we don't have problems putting you on antibiotics. So I go and get a chest x-ray, and they wouldn't let me out of the hospital. They told me I had to wait for the doctor. And then when the doctor came, he said, oh, Steve, you have to go for a CT scan, or x-ray just didn't look good. So I go for a CT scan, and then they let me go home, told me that they would let me know the results later. So at 10:30 at night, I get a phone call from the doctor. He said, Steve, I can't tell you for certain, and this is not a final diagnosis, but it sure looks like you have cancer. So, here, have a good weekend. Goodbye. So, after 6 weeks of not sleeping and on a Friday night of getting this news, I'm devastated, but yet I'm giddy. I can't help but think that God wants me home. So, okay, where was I at? So, sorry. Anyways, the next morning, my wife and I were sitting in our living room, and we say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we had this conversation that we had to give it to God. We had to live one day at a time, and we had to not take it back. And when we finished this conversation, Robin Ellison here, he called on the phone. And it wasn't for any particular reason. He just wanted to give us some encouragement, see how we were doing. And he led it at that. And I personally hadn't wanted to be in church for quite some time. I asked my wife, I said, do you want to go to church today? She said, yeah. We came here. And guess what the pastor preached? The pastor preached the exact words that my wife and I had a conversation. I was looking for the microphone that he had in our house there because he preached, give it to God. Live one day at a time. Don't keep taking it back. Word for word, Pastor, word for word. My wife and I were blown away. I mean, we had quite an eye-opening that day. So, what good has come out of God's affliction? Well, the first night that I was in the hospital after being diagnosed, I was put in a room where they kept slamming the door in the hallway, and I couldn't sleep. And I was with an 84-year-old man that was dying of cancer. So we couldn't sleep, so we struck up a conversation, and he was quite grumpy and down in the dumps, and he's asking me why I'm smiling and sitting up and in a good mood. And I witnessed to him, and I told him that you can know that you're going to heaven. And at first he says, oh, go on, but then the more we talked and the more giddy I got and the more giggly I got about it, the more he became interested. And before the middle of the night, he said, yeah, I want that. I could do that. And he bowed his head and prayed. He got up out of that bed after, and he was motoring up and down the halls like a 70-year-old.
Wow.
I mean, he was 84, and he was bedridden. He hadn't been out of bed in a week, according to the nurses. But he'd gotten up, and within 3 days of him being saved, he went home. That I call good from affliction. I got to witness to the nurses in the hospital as to why I was so smiley and upbeat and not down in the dumps and saying, woe is me. I was happy. I was proud that God wants to take me home. God showed me who my friends are. He showed me that I married my very best friend. She stuck by me through thick and thin. By the way, she told me to tell you that. I've learned that prayer is very powerful in my life, and it can be in yours. It's amazing. I go into the oncologist and he says, you realize that you have class 4 cancer? And I said, I do. He said, well, you should be in pain level here. And I said, I have no pain. 0. That is the power of prayer. I know that there's lots of people praying for me, and those prayers are working. And the best thing of all, I know God has me exactly where He wants me to be. It's right here. Thank you, Pastor.